Hello everybody! Welcome to another video from Code Shots with Profanis. In this video, we will see how to unit test components that depend on routers. Specifically, we will see how to unit test a navigation component where it has our application menu items, how to unit test a routing component where it tells the router to navigate to another component, and how to unit test a routed component where it's the destination of a router navigation. Last but not least, we will see how to unit test a functional router guard with a less verbose approach. Till the end of this video, you will learn all you need to know how to unit test these components and guards. So, let's get started. At first, let me guide you to the application we're going to use. We have here the application menu where we have the dashboard, and then we have the products. And from the products landing page, we have these 10 cards. And if we click, for example, the product one, we can see this. Yeah, I know it's a bit ugly. We can see this product detail page where we are seeing the product ID with number 1. And here also we have the path parameter with 1. And if we click the back to products, we are going back to the products list. And again, if we click the product 10, of course, we have here the ID 10 and here also the path parameter 10. Also, if I add here, for example, a product ID which is greater than 10, we navigate back to products list. And this is what we're going to unit test. Now let me show you what we have in terms of components. Here into the components we have the navigation, where we have a router link that goes to route, which is our dashboard, and then we have another router link with /products, which goes to products. And then we have into the pages, we have the products, where we have the products component, where we have just the router link, which goes to product ID. And then we have the product detail, where here we have the activated route. And also we have here our condition. If the ID is greater than 10, then we have to navigate back to products. And then we simply assign the params ID to the product ID. So let's start now with the navigation component. This is the default unit test file, and as you can see into the before it, we have the test bed with the import navigation component, and then we have the fixture, the component instance, and the deck changes. And I have just created an empty unit test here, which says should have the correct menu items. So let's first go into the navigation component and figure out what kind of steps we have to follow. At first we have to grab the link items, which is this li and this li. And to make this happen, we have to query the HTML, we have to query the DOM. And we have the option either to query for li and then the anchor tag, or to query with the router links. And this is what we are going to do. So let's go to the unit test and I will do the following. Here I have my link items. And for this I will use my fixture and then the debug element. And I will use the query alls, since I expect to have more than one items, and then I will use by.directive. And what is the directive that you're going to have? The router link. So this one now returns an array of debug elements because this is what we have here. At first, what we can do is the following. I can have here my expectation and expect the link items.length to be 2. So let's give it a try and test this out. I will copy a relative path and then I will do like ng-test. I will provide the option include and I will paste the path here. And I expect to have 2 success unit tests. And it seems that this failed and it says no provider for activated route. Of course, the problem with this is that since the navigation component has the router link, we need to provide the routers. So into the providers, I will have here the provide router. And since I don't care about the actual router for this one, I will just simply provide an empty array. Please note here that in past we used to have the router testing module, but the Angular team progressively moves away from the modules and use the functional approach. So for this reason, we will use here the provide router. And let's see what kind of response we have. And we have total 2 success unit tests. Nice. But this is not the actual unit test that we need to have. It's okay, but it's not complete. What we're going to test is that the first item, the first router link has this path, and the second router link has this path. How can we do that? Since this is a debug element, what we can do is the following. We can have something like my nav items equals, and I will use the link items, which is a debug element array, and I know that each debug element item has an injector where I can utilize here. And for this reason, I will have my map, and then I will do the following. From the injector, I want to get, what do you want to get? The router link. And the result of this one is to have a nav items of the router link. Nice. So here now I will replace the link items, and then I will duplicate this line, and I will do the following. I want my nav items, the first item, and specifically the href to be this, and then I want the second item to be /products. And what do we have here? Yeah, of course, I missed to have here the href, and this is it. And let's try to break this unit test just to make sure that everything works well. And yeah, expected products to be something wrong, and let's revert this back. And yeah, this is the very first unit test of how to test the nav items. So now let's jump and try to test the routing component. So the routing component is the component that tells the router to navigate to another component. And in our case, the routing component is the products component. So let's go here, and I will go to our products component. And again, this is my default test bed, and here I created just this unit test, which says should navigate to product details page. And into the arrange, we want to query the DOM for the first router link. And as an act, we need to click the first router link element, and as an assert, we have to check the URL. For this unit test, we're going to use the RouterTestingHarness. What is great about this is that it follows the exact flow that we're following into our application. Into our application, what are we doing? We have, let me go into the routes. We have a path, and we're telling Angular that whenever you're seeing this path, I want to activate this component, the products component. And the same goes here. For the products ID, I want to activate the product detail component. With the RouterTestingHarness, we are following the same flow. No need to mock stop the activated route or the route. And I will show you how easy it is. At first, we don't need to have the fixture component nor the detect changes. And we no longer need to have this one. And you know what? Here we need to have an instance of the harness or the type of the harness, which is my router testing harness. And then into the before each, I will have harness equals the router testing harness dot create. And please note that this returns a promise, so we need here to have an await as well. And now we have our harness. And something important about the router testing harness is that it has some very useful properties. One property is the navigate by URL. And what this is doing is that it navigates to a path and then activates a component into a router outlet, into a nested router outlet to the testing harness. And we will see progressively how this works. And now we can do the following. Component equals, again, await. And I want to use the harness and then navigate by URL, the thing that we just said. And I'm going to go to products. And what kind of component are you expect to activate? I expect to activate the products component. what this is saying that I want to navigate by URL, where do you want to navigate into that one, into that product, and the component that will be activated or we expect to be activated is the products component. And again, this kind of component is going to be activated into the router outlet of the router testing harness. But please note here that this path has nothing to do with the path that we have into our application, into this one. So we have to define our path into this unit test. So let's do that. Into the configure testing module of the test bed, I will have here my providers. And into my providers, I want to provide a router. And I want to have the path products. And I want to activate the component products component. So this is the very first step. Nice. So we now know that this component, as soon as we navigate by URL to this one, we will have the product component. And now let's go to the actual unit test. Should navigate to product details page. At first, into the arrange, we have to query the DOM for the first router link element. How can we do that? Here I will have my link items. And instead of using the fixture, this time I'm going to use the harness. And I will use the route debug element, which is similar to fixture debug element. The only difference is that now we're going to apply a DOM query to the router outlet. So route debug element, and I want to query all. What do you want to query? Well, I will use the same one by directive, and I want to search by router link. And now I have my link items. So let's go a bit into the product HTML template to see what we have. So we expect now to have 10 different router link items. 10 different router link items because we have this product service, and the get method of that one returns hard-coded 10 items. So these are our nav items. The second thing is to click the first router link element. And for this one, we will do link items. Let's have here the exclamation mark because this might be undefined. And by using the exclamation mark, I'm telling TypeScript that, you know what, I take the responsibility and I'm sure that this one will return my debug element array. And here I want to trigger event handler. Which event? The click event. And since we're going to trigger event handler into the router link, we also have to provide here the button. This is at least a requirement for the router link, and I think that the button 0 is the left click, whereas the button 2 is the right click, something like that. But let's stick to button 0. And then into the assertion, we expect the test bed, and then we can inject which one, the router, and I want the property URL to be, well, I expect this to be products/1. Please note here, the router is asynchronous, so we need to wait for it to finish. And to make this happen, we have to use the tick function, and the tick function also requires here to have the fake async. So let's wrap our unit test into the fake async and close this here as well. So this is the first thing that we have to pay attention. And the second one is that we are expecting the router URL to be products/1. Again, please note that the router that we have into the unit test has nothing to do with the router that we have into our application. Let's scroll up a bit. And what we can see is that currently into the provide router, we have only the products. We do not have the products/ID. So let's create this path as well. And I go into the path products/ID to have the component, the product detail component. So let's run the unit test to see what we have. Again, I will right click here, copy relative path, and I will do an ng test. I will provide the option include, and I will paste this here. It seems that this is success. Nice. How about now, let's try to break this. How about if we have something irrelevant and we have a failure one, expected products one to be something different. Nice. So let's now go and test the routing component, which is the destination of the actual navigation. I will go to the product detail component and let's see what we have here. Into the actual product detail component, we have the activated route. If you remember of the old unit test, before actually having the router testing harness, for the activated route, we would have to stub mock the activated route and provide the snapshot, provide the behavior subject and stuff like that. However, having the router testing harness, this is not a requirement. So let's see what we have here. Into the product detail component, we have this condition which says that if the ID is greater than 10, then we'll have to navigate back to products. And then of course we'll have to navigate to products if we click the back to products link here. So let's now go and see the unit testing. This is a default testbed implementation and we have the fixture, the component and the detect changes. And here I have some empty unit tests. The first one says that should have the correct product ID from the route. The second one says that should navigate back to products list if the provided product ID is wrong. So we expect here to provide a number something like 11, 12, something like that, and then should click back to products and go to the actual product list. Again, we don't need to have here the fixture, and here I will have my harness, and my harness is the router testing harness. And then into the before each, I will grab the harness with an await, which is my router testing harness create, router testing harness dot create. Now having the harness, I can provide here my navigation. While into the previous one, the previous unit test, we had the navigation into the before each, I would prefer to have the navigation on this file, in this product detail component actually, to have the navigation on each individual unit test. So let's see first, what do we have to do for this one? Should have the correct product ID from the route. How can I test if I have the correct product ID? Let's go to the product detail component. And what we are doing here is that we are keeping the product ID here, which is a public class field. And I guess that we can grab this product ID and make sure that it has the provided one. And I will go here and it will be like, I want to use the harness and navigate by URL. Where do you want to go? I want to go to the products/1 and the component that I expect to be activated is the product detail component. And this one, navigate by URL, as you can see, this is a promise. So what we have to have here is an await, and of course, I have to wrap this into my async. And the response of that one is the activated component. So here I have my component equals to something, and then my expectation is the component dot product ID. As you can see, this product ID is from the activated component, and here I'm going to have to be 1. And you know what? This is a number, so I will have this to string. Please note here that this navigation has nothing to do with the actual navigation that we have into our application. What we have to do is to provide our own routing configuration for this unit test. Before even I run this unit test, please see how easy it is to unit test this kind of case. Before having the harness, before having the router testing harness, we would have to mock stub the activated route and make sure that everything works well here. However, with the router testing harness, things are easier, and actually, in this kind of case, we are following the exact execution flow that our application follows. And now let's see if this actually works. And I will grab my copy relative path, and I will go here, ng-test, and into the include, I will paste the path. Nice. So it seems that we have a correct unit test. So let's now move on and do the following. So navigate back to products list if the provided product ID is wrong. All we have to do here is to grab this one, and I will paste my code here. And of course I have here to have my async. And then instead of 1, I will provide 11. My expectation though, in this case, is that I want the URL to be products, because this is what is happening in the product detail component whenever we provide an invalid ID. So here my expectation will be, I will use the test bed to inject the router. And from the router, I'm going to grab the URL, and I want this one to be /products. And let's see what we have here. And as you can see here, it says that cannot match any routes, URL segment products. And the reason is that we didn't provide here the correct routing configuration. So I have to be like, I want for the path products to activate the component. Actually, I don't care about the actual component activation, but I will use the correct one here. I will use the products component. Here I could even have something like a test component, something like that. So now we have the correct routing configuration, and let's also see something here. It seems that we don't need to have the actual component. So you know what? I don't need to provide it here either. And let's see what kind of test do we have now. And it seems that we have correct testing. And how about here if I make it to fail? And of course, this one is expected products to be something irrelevant. So let's revert this back. Nice. And now let's move on into that one. So to click back to products and go to the list. Since we now have the correct routing configuration, all we have to do is to play around with the actual DOM. So what we have now is the following. Let me copy this again, and I will paste it here. And let's start and see what is happening step by step. Let me also delete this expectation. Here I have my component. I navigate by URL, products1. So by having this command, what is happening is the product detail component is getting activated into the router outlet, the router outlet of the harness, which means that then I can use the harness, the route debug element, and I can query by something. And in this case, I will query by CSS. So let me import that. Yeah, this one. I have to import by CSS. And let's go to the product detail component to see how can we provide our query. This is my back to products. And as you can see, I have already provided here an attribute data-test back to products. So I will copy this and I will go back to the unit test. And this is actually an attribute. And for this reason, I will wrap this into these brackets. So I expect to query this one, and this is going to be my element, const element equals something. And I'm going to click that. So element, trigger event handler, which event, the click event. And now I have to have my expectations here. I expect the component.productID, and I know that this is a number, so let's convert that to string, to be, what kind of ID do we have here? 1. So this is the first expectation, and the second one is that I expect, let's use the test bed again, inject, and specifically I'm going to inject the router, and the URL I expect to be products/products. Please note here that the router is asynchronous. After we are triggering the event click, I will use here tick. Let's import this as well. And of course now I have to wrap, since we have here the tick, I have to wrap all of my unit tests into the fake async. So fake async here, fake async, and I have to wrap everything up to here. So let's say again what we are doing. We are navigating to products1. we expect this component to be activated, and then we're using the harness to use a query into the router outlet of that harness, and then we're providing the click event into that element, and then we have our expectations. So let's see if this is correct. And it seems that we have total 3 successes, which means that we have correct unit tests. So this is how we are unit testing the routing component using the router testing harness. So let's now move on and test the guard. Actually, in the previous video, I have already provided an implementation of how to unit test the functional guards, and this is the actual implementation, which I can say that this is verbose enough. This one and this as well. Having the router testing harness, all we have to do is to provide our routing configuration, and based on our routing configuration, then we can have a navigation, and from that navigation, we have to make sure if the component is activated or not. So let's see step by step. At first, let's go to the routes of the application, and what we can see here is that we have the products, and we are using the isLoggedIn guard, and this is what we have also to use in our unit test. So let's close that, and let's focus into this unit test. Let me close all the others. And I no longer need to have here the router, nor the activated route. All I have to provide here is provide router, and the route that I want to provide is, let's say, for the path logged in. At least this is for my use case. I want to have a component. Which component? So instead of using an actual component of the application, I will use this one, the logged in test component that I have just created into this file. So for the logged in, I'm going to activate the logged in test component, and also I'm going to have my can activate. And for this one, I'm going to use my isLoggedIn guard function. So this is the first setup. But you know what? Let's go into the isLoggedIn guard function to see what we have. This implementation says that if the user is not logged in, then we have to navigate to no access. So let's also create the no access into our routing configuration of the unit test, which means that I need one more path here for the no access. And the component that I want to activate will be something else. So let's duplicate this, and I will rename this no access test component, and let's use that here. Now let's see how easy it is to replace all of this verbose code. All I want to do here is the following. I'm going to use the router testing harness. I'm going to have my router testing harness, and I can create, and while creating the harness, we can also provide the initial URL. And for this one, I'm going to navigate to logged in, which is this one, logged in. Let's have here an await, and then the actual expectation will be I expect. Then let's use now the test bed, inject the router, and specifically the URL, and I want this to equal logged in, which is this guy here. This is for the case where there is logged in guard to return true. And now let's do the same. I will copy this, and let's do the same into the other unit test. Let's comment this out, and I will paste my code here. I don't need this line. And now I'm providing false into the isLoggedIn, and while I'm navigating to the logged in, I want the router URL to equal no access, because I expect the actual guard to redirect me. So again, let's copy the relative path, and I will use here ng-test with the option include, and test this out. And this is it actually. It's very easy compared to the previous implementation to unit test even the guards. So that was it. Please let me know what you think in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe and click the ring bell. See you in the next video.